Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for the Making Progress channel, and today's topic is environmentalism done right. So environmentalism gets a really bad rap. It shouldn't, and I'll tell you why later, but first let's talk about why it has a somewhat well-earned bad rap. I think I can split that into about, how many things do I have? 5 reasons. First, putting environment before humans. For example, if we nod to what many environmentalists say we should do, we delay or prevent the industrialization of India and Africa, we end up degrading the lives of billions of people. Somebody like Greta Thunberg doesn't have to care because Sweden is already industrialized and she accidentally lives in the lap of luxury of the world's first-order society. But gee whiz, that sounds real bad when you're denying industrialization to most humans because the environment's more important. Must be some kind of discussion there. Number 2, no ability to make trade-offs. Seemingly, environmentalists, in many cases, have lost that. So environmentalists are too often absolutists. It's the most important thing always, which cannot possibly be true. This extremism often makes it seem like endorsers of even rational environmentalism are just not logical people, and that's really bad for public policy and rational adoption. If you know that most environmentalists are kind of insane, they have no ability to make trade-offs, and then when someone's like, hey, from an environmental perspective, you're just like, shut up, you're a crazy person. And that's not good because there's lots of great perspectives there. Number 3, really more to the point, is leftist insanity. This is probably one of my biggest detractions from modern environmentalist movement. When all of your environmental solutions seem to funnel into just literally socialism for everyone, this is really bad press for your ability to convince economically and historically literate people of your position. So socialism in its various incantations just is like one of the worst track records you can ever imagine. And so when people say, I care about the environment, and that's why we need to have an agrarian socialist society, you're like, okay, you just don't know things and you didn't pay attention in economics class in high school. Not great. Environmentalism needs better. It needs a universal guide to how to apply it versus if you're on the right wing, you're an animal, so you don't care about environmentalism, but if you're on the left wing, you know that environmentalism really means a people's utopian socialism. That's a total non sequitur. As a matter of fact, it's backwards, and it's a painful stumbling block. I get it to you if you don't believe me. Go to any environmental organization that has members meeting in real life. Talk to someone and see how many conservatives or centrists you find versus people that are very far on the political left. Man, if you find one conservative, I will shake your hand. It's very, very impressive. Next, bad rap of environmentalism comes from forgetting about wealth creation. This is a real, real bad problem. There's something called the Kuznets curve, specifically the environmental Kuznets curve, and it says something like this. When economies are very poorly developed before industrialization, they don't really affect their environment much because they can't. You can't have factories billowing smoke into the air if you don't have factories. At some point, economic growth leads to worse and worse output for your environment because your economy is getting stronger, your alteration of chemical constituents around you is getting more intense, more voluminous, and it's just spilling everywhere and it's really bad. However, at some point, once you get economically strong enough, you can now afford to do 2 things. Figure out the technology for, which requires technology, and pay for the ability to now still produce a ton of wealth, but do so without making the environment around you nearly as bad, and then bad at all, and eventually you can pay to clean it up. So almost all the modern countries of the world, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, the United States, Canada, most of Western Europe, they're on the other side of the Kuznets curve. Sweden is so rich and so technologically brilliant, they can now use their wealth and technology to clean up the environment. I'll put it another way. The more advanced and wealthy they get, the better it is for their environment. But a lot of environmentalists seem to be living in a historical past in which the Kuznets curve doesn't exist, or they're on the other side of it. So they think, well, the more that we get wealth creation allowed, the more billionaires we have, those terrible people, then the worse it is for our environment. And that's categorically false for advanced economies. It is still true for developing economies, but then you can tell the poor peoples of India why you're not letting them develop like your country developed, because, well, finally Mother Earth needs somebody. So that's a bad deal. And any wealth-reducing policies that many environmentalists, probably the majority, support end up hampering our ability to steward our own environment long-term. The way you do environmentalism properly, which we'll get to in a bit, is by fostering as much wealth creation as possible and siphoning some of that into environmental concerns. It is not abandoning wealth creation, because then you either get to agrarian societies that don't have antibiotics and babies die when they're 3 months old regularly, or I don't know, you just don't have a society in that case, because getting wealthier has been stricken from the menu. Real bad deal. Another bad rap of modern environmentalism comes from ideologically powered irrational assessments. Many global warming supporters, or people that think global warming is anthropogenic and extant, I'm one of those people, many of them will tell you how many more people die of heat deaths recently, but few will tell you two other fun facts: that our ability to leverage technology against climate has resulted in a fractionally tinier and tinier death rate from all climate environment causes at all the time, and specifically on the balance of death through temperature. Humans have been dying less and less through temperature, in large part because of falling cold deaths, because of industrialization. And so if you tell people just a standalone article, a lot of, you read some article in a newspaper that's nominally left-wing and it's pro-environmentalism, and it talks about how heat deaths are increasing and global warming and this is bad. And if it never mentions the net aggregate amount of temperature-mediated deaths or climate-mediated deaths whatsoever, it's implicitly lying to you. And it's not lying on purpose. Mostly it's just ideologically so far afield that these people actually think they're looking at a holistic truth, and they're absolutely not. This kind of ideological bias is really bad deal, because then more moderate, reasonable folks will know you're trying to deceive them, willingly or not. If you're willingly trying to deceive them, then that illustrates your nefariousness. Like if you're an environmentalist and you lie to me about heat and cold deaths just to give me the buy-in on global warming stuff, you're now a little bit on the enemy side of things, because holy shit, you're lying to me on purpose. On the other hand, if you're subconsciously lying and you just can't have all of your unbiased faculties at your disposal because you're so ideologically bought in, that illustrates a deep irrationality and a huge skepticism, dare I say cynicism, of me believing anything else you want me to believe, because I'm like, oh, hold on. Is that really true, or do you just have a lot of feelings? If environmentalists like, the people, what is it, Just Stop Oil protesters in Europe that like go in and like throw dirt and oil at like $10 million Renaissance paintings. They have all the weird haircuts and they're just physically unattractive people, just objectively. I'm in that group, don't worry. That when they have something to say, I'm not like so curious about what they have to say, because I just see these people as people with way more feelings than anything else. If you get to be known as an environmentalist of having a lot of feelings, and you say, well, global warming is real and we need to do something about it, you could very well be correct, but you've lost most people, because most people are like, yeah, maybe, but maybe you're just insane, and they could be right. So what does environmentalism look like to a not insane person, maybe me, we'll find out, to a reasoned analysis? What does environmentalism look like to a reasoned analysis? And I have a few points here. Number one, it's non-negotiable. We're all environmentalists, and I'm going to show you how. You don't shit in your bed, I hope. You don't piss into your cereal bowl. You don't mindlessly pollute your only planet that you have to live on. This is it, folks. We don't got any other planets just yet. Period. You just don't do it. So in other words, no one in their right mind is against environmentalism in principle. No one. That's a big deal. Very important to remember. Number two, environmentalism, or actually the effects thereof, are almost universally preferred by almost everyone. How many people want natural diversity of animals and plants and trees and flowers versus how many people just like do smash all nature into a fucking parking lot? I just want to see asphalt from fucking dawn to dusk, left to right, here to the horizon. Come on now. How many people want to breathe soot-filled air versus breathe clean air? How many people, given the opportunity to emigrate from Mumbai to Montreal or Vancouver — Vancouver's like one of the cleanest cities in the world — Mumbai to Vancouver or the other way around? If you just let people live in each city for 6 months, sample, and then, okay, where do you want to go? There's tons of other differences, but just on the clean air alone, nobody going to Mumbai. Are you fucking crazy? If you don't believe me, go to Mumbai. It's really fun. Wear a mask. And I don't mean that for leftist mask Karens. I mean for everyone, because the air pollution's at a level that if you've never been there, if you haven't been that part of the world, is very difficult to wrap your head around. Nobody likes that shit. How many people want clean rivers and lakes and waterfronts and oceans versus like rancid death water that you can't swim in and you can't drink? It's not just a logical necessity, environmentalism, for all thinking people. It is also something that has near universal support. So for environmentalists to fuck that up, boy, oh boy, were they really trying. Again, to a reasoned analysis, at least to me, environmentalism is traded off against at least 3 other priorities. So it is not a monolith. It is not the only thing that matters. Priority 1 is wealth creation. Wealth is a superpower. It is the superpower. And I'm not just saying that because I'm literally a trillionaire. Wealth allows us the bandwidth to even begin to care about long-term health and cosmetic shit like how clean the air is. If I don't have food in my stomach every day, I don't give a fuck how clean the air is. Once I get food and once I can pay rent and have a decent job, now I'm like, how the hell the air smells so bad? I mean, I knew it smelled bad, but I just had more important shit going on. Wealth allows you the bandwidth to care about very second-order problems like this. Wealth also allows us extra money to spend on preventing accumulating environmental waste, much or at all. You can have a bunch of different factories produce very much waste if you pay nothing in order to have that waste organized and sequestered and treated, or if you pay quite a bit more money, you can have the factory make the same awesome goods and services you're used to, but produce almost no pollution at all. It's just a money question. And since everyone likes things and everyone needs trinkets and, good God, like computers and cars and strollers for babies, that's all made in factories. And if we have lots and lots of money, those factories can be almost 100% clean. If we have not so much money, we still need all those things, but the environment's going to have to take the L on that one. So wealth, again, is a huge thing. Wealth allows us not just to make less pollution, significantly less. If we pay another bit of buffer line of dollars, we can get to spending money on actually cleaning up the shit we already fucked up. So if we have tons and tons of wealth lying around, we can look at our oceans and beaches and even other countries' oceans and beaches and go, you guys have a lot of trash there. Like, we got a lot of money. You want us to clean it up? We clean up our own shit. Wealthier countries are categorically cleaner than poor countries because they have the money to put towards cleaning campaigns. That's huge. And future AI-powered mega wealth, quadrillions of dollars, which is just on the horizon, and of course the know-how, which costs money to figure out how to do things, will let us geoengineer a phenomenally clean environment that is almost inevitable, short of the AI just toasting us all. So that's a thing that's kind of incoming, and we don't. It's powered by wealth, and we don't want to be like, oh, we don't need development. There's this whole situation in Europe where they have this anti-growth mindset in some places, usually fostered by environmentalists, and they go, well, like we don't want economic growth because that leads to bad environmental stuff. Bullshit. It's actually the literal reverse on the other side of the Kuznets curve. And one of the things that they will lack the ability to do is they'll have an okay time. You live like, Spain, whatever. No one works anyway. People ride their bicycles. Everyone's great. But like, in the future, we'll be able to make a version of Spain that's like 100 times cleaner than even Spaniards can understand through AI-powered super tech. And if you don't accumulate a shitload of wealth to make that, it's just never going to happen. So anytime you're talking about environmentalism is important, it's important in some way related to wealth creation. It's a trade-off. It's a bit of what's going to be put ahead here or ahead here. You have to consider that. The next thing it's traded off is the best use of money to improve life and survival outside of environmentalism. Environmentalism is not the only game in town. Here's one planetary defense. We can have an awesome environment, on Earth, spending 100% of our excess income on environment, but then the big old asteroid or comet screeching towards Earth, guess what we don't have anymore? Nuclear weapons or any way to get to space or any targeting mechanisms. So now we don't have planetary defense. So we spent all this time making Earth this beautiful thing where dolphins are having sex with people or whatever the hell, and everyone's trans species, why not? And everything's miraculous. And all of a sudden, shit goes south. If you guys are into bad movies, say, Scott, you ever seen that movie called Valerian?
Oh, I've seen clips of that, but I've never watched it.
It's terrible.
I've seen clips of it because of you.
Great, my bad. Great visuals, shitty everything else. But there's these idyllic peoples that have infinite energy coming out of the ground and everything's clean in their environment. They have no war and they all love each other. And then like a space battle occurs next to them and a spaceship crashes into their planet and fucks a shitload of them up and kills the fucking princess. Hey, if you guys had a space defense system, you wouldn't have to worry about shit like that. So there's much more important shit than the environment in the grand philosophical scheme. But even more locally here close to Earth. What about homelessness? Can you imagine having 90% homelessness rate, but the environment's clean? Some environmentalists will think that's a good thing, but they're insane people. Homelessness, medicine, all that other stuff also takes priority. So how much are we funneling towards environmentalism has to be logically deduced from what other ways of spending money do we have. Environmentalism is super important, but not the only thing of importance. And within environmentalism, within just money that we've sequestered away for helping the environment, we still have to figure out what the best use of money is between the various environmental concerns. For example, in objective rankings of harm versus benefit, global warming is ranked way below fixing indoor air pollution and treating away non-greenhouse mediated pollution by a mile. There's shit way more important to the environment writ large than global warming. But global warming gets folks irate and gets the Westerners who don't deal with real environmental pollution much anymore. Like most people in the modern world don't have to like live inside of the same house that cooks their food, and they don't have to get the air from the literal smoke of the literal wood fire that cooks their food in their lungs all the time. So they can be like, oh yeah, global warming, that's an important thing. And since they control most of the global politic, that's what happens. But in real environmentalism, you have to understand there's a lot of stuff to the environment. There's soil, there's water, there's air, there's ecosystems, there's various kinds of pollution. You have to figure out, if we're going to spend a bunch of money, where do we spend it that long term gets us the best ROI to clean up the planet? That's a big deal, and it's a question environmentalists generally don't ask, but someone rational who liked the environment and cared about it could definitely ask. Another one is a logical look at environmentalism is entirely bereft of highly unlikely doomsday scenarios, which unfortunately regular environmentalists at the extremes just spout off all the time. There was a thing in the 70s where, we learned this in school in the 90s, and we're running out of landfill space. We were never running out of landfill space, ever. It was just never a concern in reality. You can Google this or ChatGPT it, no problem. It turns out the landfill space thing was always just a bullshit ad campaign for environmentalists, and it scared people to death for no good reason. Another thing is nuclear power was always one of the cleanest forms of energy tech and still is. And because it's got crazy doomsday scenarios like it'll explode, like what's that dumbass movie from the 70s? The China Syndrome, where the fucking core burrows all the way to China. I don't know how the fuck it got all the velocity to, never mind. Science, does not interact with that sort of thing. It's just people like they saw nuclear power plants and they saw landfills and they were like dystopian hellscape doom. And it turns out you can just build more landfills kind of ad infinitum in our modern understanding of waste production, which by the way is always decreasing as a fraction of the economy because we get better at making stuff. And nuclear power was always the right answer. And I will say on a personal note, the fact that we don't have mass adoption of nearly universal nuclear power, at least in the modern world, is a thing I hold to some small extent personally contemptible by current environmentalists who haven't acceded to the fact that they're really, really fucked up. Like, you guys cost us a lot. You cost the world lives, and you cost Mother Earth a shitload of pollution because you just had a lot of feelings about nuclear power because insert doomsday reasoning here. More feeling than thinking, unfortunately. Logical environmentalism also means that environmental policies must have a positive return on investment. And within that positive return on investment, the best return on investment, because you can have a lot of positive returns on investment, but some of them will be like an order of magnitude lower. They're all positive, but some are just way better. So for example, investing in clean tech, a little bit extra above its market value, just a bit and simply adapting to global warming. As the Earth warms, we adapt our farming technologies, we adapt where we have buffers against the sea and all this other stuff, has been run in economic modeling, and in various pieces of literature, it costs like 1/100th for the same benefit as a policy that would massively curtail industrial development right now to take greenhouse gas emissions down to zero in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years or whatever insane, unrealistic timeline is. This is insanity. For example, the Kyoto Protocol was always from the start an economic disaster. And that means it's a disaster for real human beings. And because it's an economic disaster, we could have really toked the economy up and just paid to re-engineer our fucking world by now. That will not have happened if everyone signed the Kyoto Protocol, just as an example. And what we do to help the environment must be improving the environment at reasonable cost compared to other priorities and in better ways than what might be politically most appealing. Again, global warming is a real small situation in the environmental scheme, but you wouldn't know it because it has so much PR support because a lot of people have feelings. Lastly, true logical evidence-based environmentalism must be long-term focused. Cleaning the environment is something you do by definition for the future. So making sure to understand that we can't clean up everything today for infinite cost, but that we can set the stage for a cleaner world tomorrow and cleaner the day after still, and so on, is really, really important. A lot of environmentalists bring this panic to environmentalism, which is to me, they turn 16 and go, oh my God, the world's dying. We got to do something now. And it's like, shut up. Other people have been here before you. They thought through a lot of this. Some of them don't give a shit and they're not such great people. Other people just know we don't have the money. Still, other people are working on incrementally making the environment cleaner over time. That's what we want to do. We can do that quickly. We can do that slowly, but it's all by increments. This kind of shock value of we have to alter society right now or else. There is nothing after that or else. It's all make-believe and it's all a crap load of feelings. All right. So that's nice, Mike. What specific policy ideas can you recommend that folks who would look at it and be like, okay, that makes sense? Because a lot of feelings, a lot of logic discussed. What about policy ideas? Don't worry, I have 6. So, policy ideas. Number 1, you want to set long-term, realistic, and financially responsible environmental standards. For example, if you announce that next year every company has to have XYZ new emissions standard to meet, it's going to cost the world way more than benefit the world. It might bankrupt 90% of companies, and then we're back in the medieval times. Terrible, terrible idea. But if you understand how businesses work and that they have to have timelines to adapt, you can say, okay, in the next 5 years, the environmental standards are going to be the same as today. Promise. Tough to do in a democratic society, much easier to do in a more technocratic society. I think we're headed to with AI, hopefully. Jesus Christ, we'll see. But you basically say, okay, in the next 5 years, same standards as today. Businesses, you don't have to do shit. Don't start worrying. You don't have to do anything today. But from year 6 from now to year 15 from now, every 3 years during that time, the standards will escalate to cleaner and cleaner and cleaner standards. And then they'll stop for another 5 years while we reformulate the strategy. It almost doesn't matter what the specifics are. If you give businesses 2 things, the economic transition is going to be way more seamless. Thing 1 is a long time horizon because they already have a lot of shit in the works they're going to have to unwind, possibly at great expense, in order to make shit happen. Possibly can't do it at all. And the other thing is a big one, predictability. So if I tell you in XYZ years this will be happening and this is the exact standard you're going to be met to, well, shit, it's just another cost in business. That's business planning. No problem. We have the bandwidth. We have the timeline. We have the known way to architect ourselves. What we have today in a lot of squabbling between the parties in various parts of the world for environmental discussion is the timeline's like whenever the fuck the next president gets elected. And what we're going to do is a giant question mark until the next president gets elected, and then they churn out this crap document and put it to Congress that no one ever reads and has a bunch of contradictory regulations in it. Not the way to do things. Really, really, really bad idea. So number one, setting long-term realistic and financially responsible environmental standards. Number two, you set cleanliness standards like emission standards, pollution standards, and let private industry do almost all of the figuring out how to actually meet them versus telling private industry, hey, you got to use these kinds of solar panels or you can't use coal. If you just set cleanliness and emission standards, private industry is the best possible positioned intellectual entity to think about what do these things cost? What are the benefits? How do we meet these standards in the most efficient and economical way possible? Whereas if you just say, well, do it like this, there may be 150 other better ways to do it than the one you figured out. So environmental policy shouldn't be like, here's the new standard of what we let you use and not use. It should be like, here's how much you can pollute. Figure out how to do that on your own. That works way, way, way better than a formal industrial policy. Number three, let companies pay their way out of emission standards to some effect. A lot of people with a lot of feelings about environmentalism look at that, the fact that some companies or celebrities can buy credits and work down their carbon credits or whatever. They think that's anathema because they're seeing it more moralistically. From a practical perspective, it offers huge, huge advantages. Obviously, it's not like, hey, just pay to pollute however much you want, but something that looks like this. You say to corporations, if they meet 100% of the environmental standards of the day, they don't pay a fee, no fee at all. If they meet 79% or less of the standards, get a score of 79 and less, they get shut down for criminal negligence. No, you're not allowed to have green ooze come out and go into the river. You're done. But if they meet somewhere between 80 to 99% or 80 to 100% of standards, for every little bit of polluting less they do, they pay less of a fee. If they pollute more and more and more, all the way up to 80% of standards met, they pay a bigger and bigger and bigger fee. So that way, you incentivize them technically to pay as little as possible, to pollute as little as possible, but now there's a price to their pollution. Why the hell would we want to price pollution? This makes no sense to most people, but I can explain in a way that's relatively simple enough for my dumb ass to understand, so hopefully they'll catch on too. If you set the prices right, kind of high enough, companies have both an incentive to pollute less, and if their industry is so valuable to the economy on the whole that they can afford to pay a little bit more to pollute, we actually want them to do that. Let's say you have an industry that makes a pollution cleanup device, and that pollution cleanup device cleans up 2 times more pollution than it costs to make the device. But that company that makes the device, you can't make it with zero pollution. It's just not a technology we understand yet. So you have to make some pollution. If you tell that company, for no cost will I let you make this device, we're not cleaning up any pollution because the device never gets made. But if you tell the company, listen, if you pay a certain cost and it's worth it to you, we let you make this device, it's just going to be pricier, but now this device cleans up more pollution than it causes, it's a net benefit to everyone. And luckily, because money can be used for a bunch of different stuff, not just environmentalism, not explicitly cleaning up pollution, if a company does something so fucking valuable to your society that it can just eat the pollution cost, then that's probably a good idea. We at least consider letting that company do it because it's clearly worth the cost. And if we can accurately price in how much pollution is being made and we charge the company a little bit more than that, then all of a sudden, if the company really sees it fit to just crank away, it's giving us so much money back through that little tax system that we can afford to pay 100% of the pollution cost down and clean up the world. A company that makes, let's say, the most critical part of a fusion reactor that in 2045 powers the whole world. If it turns out that is a little bit of a polluting situation, look, man, that company makes like trillions of dollars a second. They can afford to pay for that shit. But if you just don't let them do it, if you don't let them pay down their pollution credit, well, then you're stopping way more wealth creation, and that's net negative for society. So the money that you tax away from these companies that are willing to pay extra go directly to cheaper ways of cleaning the environments, so their payment plus their pollution on net is a positive for environment because they can pay so much. They can pay for their pollution to get sunk down to zero in the 50 other ways we can do that with pollution. So whether or not someone thinks, once they understand the economics of this, whether or not someone thinks this is an admissible way of doing things is a really decent litmus test of whether or not they're either economically illiterate or ideologically psychotic. So if they just don't understand, that's okay. Economics, it's complicated and it's really dismal. If they understand but say, nope, this is still morally wrong, they're just kind of ideologically far gone, and it just might not make a whole lot of sense to talk to. Next, a logical approach to policy and environmentalism understands that cleaning the environment is exponentially costly. What does that mean? Going from 0% clean to 90% clean, just think of a room or a river with pollutants in it. The way technology works is going from 0 to 90% clean costs, let's say, X amount of money. Going from 90 to 99% clean costs 10 times that amount of money. Going from 99 to 99.9% clean costs 100 times that money. So before you set insane emission standards ideologically, or say 0 emissions is the standard, you have to run the costs. At some point, you'd be like, okay, we can have a world for the next 5 or 10 years until tech gets better, in which we have 99% cleanliness at a cost of 5% global tax. You'd be like, okay, but hold on. What about 99.9% cleanliness? Yes, that's actually going to consume 99% of the GDP and everyone's going to starve to death. You're like, oh, fuck. Well, I guess we shouldn't shoot for 99.9, huh? Guys, it's that complicated. There are no distinct right or wrong answers, but you can at least see the costs on an exponential curve and the benefits on whatever shape curve they have, and find an intersection that makes some damn logical sense and at least isn't, we're doing nothing about the environment, or, well, we're doing things about the environment and it's going to lead to the cataclysmic shutdown of all of society just so we can make the environment as clean as possible. 2 non-starters we want to avoid. Number 5, if you're going to do anything active as an environmentalist, the beginning of where to start is usually in the deregulation and detaxing, less or no taxes, less or minimal regulation on advanced technology. Advanced tech, most environmentalists don't like because it's industry and bad and it's not Mother Earth, guy has D-sized titties or whatever. That's a Captain Planet reference if you caught that one. To most of these people, they don't like tech. But tech is our way out into a cleaner world. It already has been. After the middle of the Kuznets curve, tech is the way you clean the world. I mean, the way you literally clean a river isn't just getting a bunch of hippie friends together and straining it or some shit, but technically it's also technology. It's advanced machines with all kinds of catalytic converters and shit like that. What kind of tech do we mean? Deregulate heavily and heavily detax, thus incentivizing clean power technology, solar, geothermal, wind, wave, fission, fusion, the whole thing. Nanotech. Nanotech is going to eventually be so powerful, it has the potential to clean up 99.99999% of all pollution in many cases. We should be really looking into nanotech if we're really environmentalists and thinking long term. And of course, AI and robotics. To us, pollution seems like an intractable or nearly intractable problem, is pollution reduction, and also specifically climate management. You say, well, we can actually re-engineer the Earth so that global warming goes backwards and we can have whatever temperature we want on Earth. People say that's nonsense. It is nonsense to a human thinker, but to an AI of sufficient complexity and power, this is like a nominally simple problem. Let me give you an analogy of something of 2 different intelligence levels that are sort of roughly equally separated by orders of magnitude. To your dog, cleaning up a room is a non-starter. It can barely understand what that means, and sure as shit can't do it. It doesn't have the appendages to do it. It can't see over the bed. It doesn't even really know what clean means. Just like to humans, geoengineering to control the environment nearly perfectly is like, what the fuck? You would need to know why like hurricanes spin the way they do? Do you understand how complex the earth is? Oh yeah, just like cleaning a room to a dog. But to a teenager, cleaning a room is a matter of being like, fine, fuck it, and they do it in 20 minutes. To a sufficiently powerful AI, there's nothing like on principle about climates that's so complex that AI can't gain traction to it, and AI is already doing really well at predicting environmental phenomena. So it's just a thing like, if you're really on Team Planet, you're going to have to want to back clean tech a shitload. That means you also back capitalism a shitload. Free markets, regulated to make sure we do minimal pollution for the cost, and making sure that we get as much clean tech developed as possible is just like what smart people figure out when they get to environmentalism, turn off their feelings for a second and turn on their thoughts for a bit. But you won't hear it much in most environmental circles because they're just like, unfortunately just hippies a lot of the time. Lastly, point number 6, logical environmental policy means we stop telling young people that the world is going to end soon unless we upend society and make environmental issues our only priority. There's that weird video of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez like peeling chestnuts or some shit. She's talking in leisurely tone about how the world's going to end in like 15 years. So first of all, it's a huge discontinuity there, because it's like, would you really think the world's going to end, but you're really oddly calm about it? You must really not mean this. But this idea of telling young people that we only have a limited time to live, I mean, if true, this would be like a World War II like unified mission of a generation. It would be awesome. Let's get it done. Let's change society. Let's survive versus die. But it's not true. And it's making a lot of folks anxious and depressed, or at least helping them become more anxious and depressed for no reason at all. And this is occurring during like the most explosive time of abundance and betterment ever. And so a big part of environmental policy is to see the environment as just one of our many concerns, a very important one, I will say, but one of our many concerns. It is not life or death now at any point that we can tell. It's not cataclysmic, but it requires our best thought and best action to go forward, which means rational, evidence-based policy based in modern economics and atmospheric and climate science. Not just have oil protesters who got made fun of in high school because they didn't look like everyone else, and they have to sublimate that feeling like the underdog into helping the environment, so they just go have a lot of feelings and help almost no one. If you're an environmental protester, namaste, I love you, you're great. But folks, stay in school, and I'll see you next time.